Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and I'm hanging out today again with my friend Kat from the creativeintrovert.com. Kat has been helping me with my social media over the past year, helping me especially to aggregate all of the questions that you put out there on YouTube and through email and stuff like that. And she's been putting them into kind of reframing them, putting them into like little interviews so that we can do some Q&A sessions together. So thanks, Kat, for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. And I think today we're going to be doing a part two of something that we've already touched on, which is all about Dharma. And so people have already seen the first one, hopefully, but if not, you can go back and watch that. Today, we're just going to be diving a little bit deeper into it. So in terms of looking in our own charts, if somebody comes to you and they say, Achyuta, what is my Dharma? Like, how do I know based on my astrology?
Yeah, that's that's tricky because like if you ever look at there's a text and there's a text written by Rhetorius, and you can pick up the translation copy by James Holden on Amazon. Maybe we can flash a picture of this up or something. In that text, he gives an outline for discovering who the navigator basically of your chart is, right? Who is the steersman, who's the helmsman of your ship, and this kind of this planet that he goes searching for, which I think Chris Brennan has also done like a 11-hour podcast on or something, right? It's like the technique is really elaborate, so I'm not going to try to explain it right now, but you could check it out on the Astrology podcast. It's a really good episode. The process is really elaborate, and that planet can change depending on the chart. So similarly, if we're trying to track down a person's personal daimon, the spirit guide in the chart, which is a process that ancient astrologers also had, there's a number of different candidates that can, kind of potentially represent the daimon. So actually in ancient astrology, there's a lot of techniques that are like that, where if you're looking for a critical planet to represent the mother or the father or something like, or sisters, or, let's say female children versus male children or what have you, that there will sometimes be a variety of techniques that are used to figure out which planet it is. In horary, it's similar. You have to assign signifiers. Well, this planet's going to represent the cat. This planet's going to represent the surgery that the cat has to have. This planet's going to represent the owner. Here's the vet. And there's not just one way of assigning them. And sometimes you can get a chart wrong by virtue of not assigning your signifiers properly. In ancient astrology, a lot of it is learning the different methods of assigning signifiers. So I say all of that as a qualifier because there isn't just read your ascendant ruler. That's your Dharma. It's not, so it can't be a cookie cutter thing. And it's not even just one planet necessarily, but sometimes, for example, especially with studying Dharma, you're usually looking at the ascendant, which is actually the house that Indian astrologers named Dharma. So that house, planets in that house, the exaltation ruler of that house, the planet that has the most dignity over the ascendant degree. So for example, the ascendant degree could be in the bounds of Saturn in say it's in Libra. The ascendant degree is in the bound of Saturn, and Libra is also the exaltation of Saturn, and that degree happens to be on the exaltation degree of Saturn, right? In which case Saturn might end up having a lot more power over the ascendant in that Libra rising chart than Venus does. So there's different ways of like parsing it out, but planets in the first house, the ruler of the first house, the exaltation ruler of the first house, the planet that has the most dignity over the ascendant degree in the first house, planets that are closely aspecting by degree the ascendant, planets that are closely aspecting planets in the first house, planets that are closely aspecting the ruler of the first house. You see what I mean? So the list of possibilities for which planets you might look at in order to understand how Dharma is being represented symbolically there's a lot of flexibility.
Right. So I guess you could look at a bunch of these and then start seeing where are the commonalities. I guess I learned that from you, this idea that, if you see something 3 times, you know that that's probably going to be a good hit.
Yeah, that's it. You look for what's speaking, what's really loud here. I sometimes use that image of like the image of the mall kiosk from the 1990s, where you look at it and it looks like it's just a bunch of dots, and then you stand back and like, oh look, there's a giraffe or something. Right? Yeah. So sometimes it's like that. You're using these techniques to help you see the giraffe coming out at you. But yeah, typically it's going to be something to do with the first house.
Okay. So let's say we think we've figured out what it is. Our astrologer has helped us. How do we know if we're on that path? And maybe this goes a little bit outside of astrology, but any thoughts on that?
You know what? Let me just look at. I'm going to look at a chart just anonymously, and I'm not going to give like any detail. I'm just going to pull one up so I can look at something. So like I'm looking at a chart right now that has Aquarius rising, and there's no planets in the first house, just Aquarius rising. And so Saturn is probably the planet that I would start by looking at. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay, so just start by looking at Saturn. I notice in this chart that Saturn, the closest aspect to Saturn is a trine from Venus in Virgo. So now I'm getting, and it's real close degree-based aspect, within 2 degrees. So now I'm starting to get a kind of Venus-Saturn harmonious relationship going on, and there's no other planets aspecting Saturn. So what I would do is, and then I would take the house topics that the planets Saturn and Venus are in. So in this case, Saturn's in Capricorn, Venus is in Virgo. Saturn's in the 12th house, Venus is in the 8th house. I would take all of that and start combining it as a way of understanding a person's essential, the way I look at Dharma, the way that I would capture it in like a phrase would be essential nature and essential duty. And by duty, I mean that which the person should be actively giving to the world, that comes from that kind of joyous gift or calling within. In the ancient world, your dharma might be something like just, playing the role that you were expected to play in society, like according to your caste or your, whatever, the trade of your parents or something like. So it could be something very mundane, but I juice it up a little bit, right? And I just say, okay, it's like your dharma is about what kind of essential categories you fall into as a personality, with certain gifts and traits that you should somehow be giving generously to the world, to be happy, to feel fulfilled, but also to do some good in the world. This is assuming that everyone's dharma would be used in service to others and the world, and not to one's selfish interests, of course, which is not always the case.
Right. It just made me think then that maybe when these systems were created, people had less choice in general.
Yeah. Oh yeah, far less.
And in a way, I guess a lot of the talk around this would be, you need to figure out what this is so that you can just go with it. Whereas now people have so much choice. A big question, especially when you come and see an astrologer, it's like, I don't like what I'm doing. How can I change it and do something like really cool? So I'm just wondering if like that goes against, in a way, I don't know, the ancient system, just because our lives are different.
Yeah. I mean, people rarely in the modern world, as far as I can tell, just and studying yoga and stuff like that, and it's also being in certain quote unquote third world countries, or being in places where there is far less like opportunity or upward social mobility, or stuff like that. We immediately, and I think very arrogantly, look down our noses and say it's so much better here because we have all this choice. But there's also something called, paralysis by analysis.
Yeah.
You have
looking at a menu and just, there are too many things on the menu.
Yeah.
Don't know what to choose. I'll just leave.
Yeah. And, or you get paralyzed, or you get lethargic, or you get morose, or whatever. I think there's something, I know this is like the worst analogy, and I've used it before, and I always feel kind of bad when I use it, but at one point we were researching what dog to get, and I was learning a lot about dogs, and like talking to some breeders and people who like, oh, we have some black lab puppies that are going to be born, you can come pick one up, or something like that. And just like getting to know different things about dogs, and being like, this dog needs to do this, right? This is the environment, these are the conditions that really make it happy. And this dog needs to pull heavy stuff. And this dog needs lots of exercise. And you know what I mean? Like all the different things that dogs have been bred for and that dogs have done and stuff like that. And that there is a sense in which, you know, that we all have certain, like a disposition that makes us happy, but that for Dharma, there is a sense of being constrained by it, of being like, it's a little saturnine in a sense. It's like there is a sense of being duty bound to it. For example, like, you know, acyuta-bhava needs to be fed, you know, dense ancient wisdom texts every day and really needs to like chew and play around with like spiritual paraphernalia, you know, like, and if he doesn't do it, he gets really morose, you know.
You don't want that dog.
Yeah, he stops eating his food at his dish or whatever, you know. So I think that's the point, is that there's a lot of the times we think of Dharma as like, you know, something that like it should make me really happy, and it does. Like Dharma is something that is making us happy in a mundane sense, but it's also something that in a sense is limiting. We have to be bound by it to experience the joy of it. And that's really tough in this day and age, because for a couple of reasons. One, so many different elements of society are rooted in an unfair distribution of wealth, power, rights, etc. And so, you know, we don't live in an ideal society, in other words, where like you feel like you have a choice to accept or live into the parameters of what you're born into, because some of the parameters that we're born into are so grossly unjust, right? So I think it's tough, because like the Dharma in a chart, for example, could show that you're sort of a working class person, let's say, like you're born into a family of like people who like to use their hands, like carpenters, or I don't know, something like that. And there's some part of you that maybe really, like planets and earth signs, you really need to like work and have your hands in the dirt and like kind of be earthy in some way. I don't know what way, but just in some way. But society can actually make a person averse to trusting that is actually what will make you happy. Because it says, well, you know, it might not be valuable to be a working class person. It's only valuable if you're like a Hollywood celebrity or something like that. So the tricky thing about Dharma is that a lot of people come in, I think that ideally people come in, they're like, yeah, I want to know my Dharma. It's like, okay, but you know, your Dharma, like very few people have the Dharma of being like fantastic, fabulous, wealthy, ultra beautiful, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like it's not this exalted thing. A lot of the times Dharma is kind of like the common stuff that, you know, if you do every single day, if you get comfortable within the parameters of it, there's a joy in it. But it is kind of, Dharma is in a sense a service or duty bound concept in some ways.
Yeah, I really like that word duty, but if you had said that to me like a few years ago, I'd been like, no, that's like horrible. I've come to like that idea. Probably Saturn return has helped with that. But yeah, it's like if you've come from that world of self-improvement, or if you're in that world, and the story is you can have anything you want, you just have to set your mind to it, and you see all these examples of people who have done really impressive things with their Dharma. But I don't know. I'm definitely learning from astrology that there's something more rewarding in the attitude that you take towards your Dharma. If I see something in my chart and I don't like it because I want something else, because I've seen it on TV or something, or I've just got this fantasy, it's actually I'm finding it more rewarding just to kind of see it and bring the best attitude I can to it. That seems more heroic to me.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's such a tricky conversation, because on the one hand, you know, you can't tell people to, Dharma it should inherently be like the dog that needs the work. The work is a labor. So there's a labor, there's a sweat, there's putting your blood and tears into your Dharma, but it does make you happy. So every soul has something like that, that you feel like you can put yourself into. It's a service. It's something that in some ways limits, but it's really you, and it really makes you feel happy. There's a big difference between that and someone being like, in the ancient sense, sometimes in India, right? Like sometimes the word dharma will be used as a way of being like, you ought to behave and conform to some kind of social status that you're born into, which can be, of course, really, damning, basically. You're a woman, so shut up, and that's your dharma. Like that's horrible. So that's not what we're talking about. But we are saying that there is a way in which your dharma is probably, on some level, it's probably not this kind of unlimited capacity for awesomeness or something like that. That, you know what I mean? So,
yeah, and that being a big difference. So there's a dharma that society might want to put on you, and you have to be able to maybe distinguish that from your personal dharma. And I mean, you said just the word like happy, and maybe that's one way of thinking about it. But because my original question was like, yeah, how do we know we're on it? Is it as simple as saying, oh, I'm enjoying this, like
okay.
this
is the best one. Sorry, I don't mean to. I've just got an idea in my head. No, you finish up what
no,
you're
that
gonna
was
say.
it, yeah.
Okay. So if you ever have you ever I don't know if you work out regularly or anything like that, but have you ever had like a really hard run or really hard workout before?
Yeah.
Okay. While you're doing it, it sucks, right?
Yeah.
But while you're doing it, this is what I need to be doing. This is good for me. I know I'm going to feel good afterward because I've done this.
And there's that kind of satisfaction if you're sore the next day, or even
Yep.
better, sore 2 days afterwards.
Yes,
Then there's even
exactly.
more.
Yes, exactly. You're sore. You a couple days later, you're sore. You're sore the next day, whatever. Dharma is a bit like that, where there's a sense of service behind it and a sense of being limited or constrained to have to do something. And, but we willingly do it. And when we willingly do it in this kind of service attitude, we feel rewarded by it. And now that can be used in a mundane sense, or it can be used in a spiritual sense. It really depends on where our consciousness is. For example, let's talk about Donald Trump's Dharma, just briefly. Whether you like him or not, this is just the case in his birth chart. He has Mars right on the ascendant in Leo, right? And he has the sun in Gemini in the 11th house, ruler of his ascendant, and they're in a close sextile to one another. So the man really loves to network socially. He's very aware of, let's say the 11th house, like what the group is thinking. And Mars in Leo, he really likes to assert his will in this kind of kingly fashion. Someone might say that he has a strong man tendency, Mars and Leo right on the ascendant, right? So in a mundane sense, if a person is like not turning their life towards divinity, then that makes them feel good to be like that, and they get rewarded in a worldly sense. I conform to some attitude or behavior that I think, I'm sure that for Trump, he has had to work to be that way. It's not like he's shaped and honed a character, basically, and that it's gotten him certain results that have been rewarding. So in the worldly sense, when we're doing our Dharma, it's like it's the workout plan that's building us muscle, materially speaking. You know what I mean? But spiritually speaking, when we're doing our Dharma, the key difference is that you feel like you are helping those who are in need, helping those who are suffering or less fortunate. You feel that you are doing some good in the world. You feel that you're improving yourself as a person. You feel that you're improving the lives of others around you, and you're doing something that feels unique to you, and there's some sacrifice involved in doing it.
Okay. And it sounds like you could take, let's say with Trump, he could take that Mars and Mercury and apply it to something that would feel like that.
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, any of us at any point in time could, like, the same archetypal combination could definitely be used for human, the same, what do I want to say, the same archetypal characteristics turned in selfless service would find a way of expressing themselves, in a virtuous manner. Yeah, now that doesn't mean that it could turn on a dime. We also know that like planets in fixed signs, and he has an out of sect malefic on his ascendant in a fixed sign. So we also can tell by virtue of a lot of other things in the chart, whether the more difficult characteristics of the planet are going to be on display or not within the personality or dharma. And that is almost always like a tell in terms of, what a person might struggle with, or what the challenges might be in trying to find that more selfless service of their dharma.
Yeah, and that's something. I mean, it sounds like you can't. I don't know. You can't make that happen. Like what? I mean, maybe that's a bad question.
Well,
Or
you can make it happen. You can okay, so let's say like you're working out, you want a thinner waistline, or you want more muscles, or you want to lose weight, or you want to feel better. So with the right attitude and with work and determination, like people can achieve those results. Now, the same thing is true with our dharma. Astrology can be very helpful in helping us understand like what are some of the core characteristics of your dharma, and then if you know what they are, the astrologer should be able to help you understand how they might express themselves more negatively or selfishly, what kind of traps you could fall into with them, and how the same qualities could be used more constructively. And if you understand that, then you just go to the existential or spiritual gym of life and you start working on it. Oftentimes it helps to have spiritual community, spiritual practices, a therapist. I mean, people who are trying to do similar work on themselves. But I do think we can shape that. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah, and it made me think that it just takes this spark, and then from there, these other things come about. Like even just being curious about astrology and how that can lead to a spiritual path, even though that wasn't what you were looking for necessarily.
Right.
Right. But I'm also thinking about, like, let's say all of our paths are meant to be spiritual in like the ideal version of all of this. Is that part of our dharma? Like, is there a path? And obviously, maybe it takes like multiple lifetimes to figure it out. But is that part of it, or is that something that's separate to the chart? Like the way, like for me, finding astrology, finding your stuff, getting more into, Bhakti and stuff, like that is is that part of my chart, or is that just something outside of that?
It's a part of your chart as soon as it's a part of your consciousness, right? So, and this is basically what we're getting down to is the key distinction between spirit and matter. Like, is the chart
just that simple issue,
right? Is the chart reflective of spiritual things or only material things? In other words, will the chart tell me if I will become spiritual or not? It's a change in consciousness changes the chart completely, right? Because the you could say that the chart is nothing more than a reflection of the karmic field that you're born into. Your relationship to that field changes when your consciousness changes. So if let's just say, in other words, you always have the choice. It always ultimately rests on our free will, whether or not we choose to become more conscious or to engage in a relationship with our source, awakening our soul. That those are choices that we make, and to the degree that we make those choices, the same exact placements in a birth chart start to be seen and understood as part of the facilitation of that awakening. All of our experiences in life start to become a part of the awakening of the spirit soul, the deepening of intimacy with the divine. If we're choosing not to do that, then the chart tends to become more reflective of the twists and turns of our material karma. Spirit's always there experiencing it. It's not that it's not spiritual. It's just that we're not experiencing it as spiritual because we're more covered over by our enmeshment or our absorption in materiality. So that in a sense, it's like, it's spirit's always here, just, sort of just waiting and hanging out. The chart isn't in that sense purely material, which is why there are perhaps more refined seers who can look into a chart and sort of see more about where a soul is at in terms of its spiritual development. But I think for the most part, I just look at a chart and I go, yeah, if at any point in time, if a person can choose to start awakening spiritually. And as soon as they do, the placements in this chart mean something very different in terms of not so much of what will happen maybe, but in terms of what it will mean for the person and how they'll relate to it.
Yeah, so there's basically an opportunity to choose at any time, and this is where I guess the free will portion comes in. And I'm trying to remember it all, but like it's this idea that there is an overall harmony. How do you say it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But then the thing that we can we've got an amount of free will that can, not change it, but if you go with it, you have more agency or something.
Yeah. So there's like this overarching providence, or there's this overarching way in which there's a destiny that we are experiencing, that's laid out in front of us like a fate or a destiny. But the point is that it wouldn't matter at all what the destiny was if we decide to turn the light bulb on upstairs. Then that destiny is it's Leela, it's divine play. So I think that's the main point to come back to, is that the only real use of free will. People think that free will, for example, means what am I going to choose in a material sense? Well, that's like saying, how am I going to play around with the different working parts of a completely mechanical machine? It's like the potential outcomes and experiences are all limited by the laws and mechanisms of the machine. So if you think that's free will, fine, but that's what we're saying free will in the material sense is. And you're not really free in that regard, because you might be choosing or making choices, but you're making them within the context of a totally legalistic, mechanistic system. The forces and laws of nature are what you're choosing among in between and then experiencing outcomes in. The way that real freedom, the only way that it can really be used is in terms of the conscious, in when we're in material form anyways, when we make the conscious shift and we say, oh, okay, who am I in relation to this world that I'm in? When we start focusing on that and start focusing on our conscious self, in our relation to other conscious beings, then we start to enter into a different experience of reality itself, and that experience is what it means to be free, because it's in that experience that everything that's actually organic, that's actually happening in the moment, that's actually real and tangible. Just like if you're in a conversation with someone, you have that moment where you feel like something is unfolding here, like the muse you've been talking about on your podcast. Like something real and present is speaking and happening right now, and the hairs stand up on your arms, and because you can feel the spirit is moving. We want that kind of an experience, and that kind of experience doesn't generally occur when we're just like in a relationship. If I just go like, okay, you and I are going to go do this thing, and then we're going to go do that thing, and we'll call it happy afterward, and right, it's like
pre-planned fun.
Yeah, it's like pre-planned fun, right? It doesn't. So similarly, a lot of times we think our free will is, it's like that. So does that make sense?
It does. My brain has started to hurt, so I feel like that's time to wrap up.
Good. Yeah. So I hope that you all found this interesting. Thanks, Kat, for being here today. If you have any other questions, you can direct them to us at info@nightlightastrology.com, or leave them here in the chat box. We'd be happy to field them for you and do more Q&A videos. One thing that I'll wrap up with is if you go to my website, nightlightastrology.com, and look at the Bhakti page, I have some videos that I make there discussing Bhakti Yoga in depth. This talk, of course, on Dharma there's a lot more that can be said that can lead into, if people are interested in all the Bhakti videos that I make, especially the videos that I do on mantra meditation. If you don't have a meditation practice, mantra meditation is a really helpful way of starting to use the free will to tune into our own consciousness, which is a great place to start. If you're kind of like, that sounds cool, but how do I actually, like, literally, how do I do that? Mantra meditation is a great place to start. So check it out if you're interested. All right, that's what we've got for today. Thanks again, Kat, for being here. And we'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.